So we have been working through this series, The One Thing. This interesting phrase is only found 5 times in the Bible in this context. So far we've looked at Psalm 27, where David talked about in a tough time he had the choice of pushing away God or leaning into God. And he said that the one thing he was seeking, the one thing he sought, was to be in the presence of God. Then we looked at Mary and Martha who was trying to say yes to too many choices as she was worried about so many things. And Jesus suggested that rather than the many, maybe only a few are important. Actually, Jesus went a step further and said that the one thing is needed, just one thing is needed, and encouraged them to reflect on how they portion out their energy, their time into the different priorities. We also looked at the rich young ruler who Jesus said, what you're doing is good, but you are lacking something. And we reflected whether we might be lacking something in our life that's stopping us experiencing the fullness of life that Jesus is offering. And so today we get to our 2 last readings of the one thing. And to give away my punchline straight away, at the beginning of the sermon, these readings I want to suggest are about certainty versus uncertainty, or it's about knowing, about the assurance and ultimately the assurance of our salvation, or the assurance of our faith. Certainty is an interesting commodity today. In a changing world, it's hard to be assured of anything. The last 18 months has taught us that. We seem to be so used to things being turned upside down that we've just got accustomed to not making any guarantees anymore because things are so uncertain. Did you see the way in the announcements I kept hedging my bets over when we're going to reopening? How the HSC prayer picnic's going to work? Like, we're pretty sure we know the answers, but we're still... that level of being 100% certain is very hard to get to. And so these last 2 one thing statements that we're exploring in the Bible today, I think they're about finding some certainty. Or in the words of the blind man who became the ex-blind man, it's about knowing. It's about knowing. So let's jump into the first story of Jesus, the healing of the blind man, and the line, the one thing I know, the one thing I know. So as we heard, this story starts off with a theological discussion between Jesus and some of his disciples' followers about whose fault or whose sin has caused this man's blindness. And Jesus basically said, look, nobody's sin has caused this man's blindness, he's just blind. And then to show that God was at work, Jesus heals the man, and then chaos just erupts. There is a lot happening in the story, and we did not read out the entire story. It was just too long. And so I encourage you, if you have time today, sit down and read the entire chapter, John chapter 9, and see the full story of what happens. When I read through the story, I found that it was a story of disruption. There's definitely chaos, and there are questions. Lots and lots of questions. People want to know things. And that's the key word I'm going to keep coming back to. Know. People wanted to know things. Firstly, people gathered around the blind man and started to ask the ex-blind man questions. What has happened? Where did Jesus go? What's going on here? And the blind man simply says, I don't know. I don't know. So they take him to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees want to know stuff. They said, how did you get your sight back? Why did Jesus heal on the Sabbath? How can a sinner perform signs? What do you say about this man Jesus? And then they call in the parents of the blind man, and they ask, well, is this really your son? Was he really born blind? How is it now that he can see? And people just keep on going, I don't know. I don't know. How do you cope when you're bombarded by lots of questions? Too many questions can make us very stressed. We start to doubt our answers. And well, I don't know about you, but certainly I know that for myself, I start to become less certain about the things that I know if people keep asking questions. Like, I'm normally pretty confident within myself. But someone the other day, I made some statement and somebody said, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And I had to go, "Well, I'm not now. Not now that you're questioning whether I'm sure or not." I was pretty sure that I was right, but the very fact that they were asking me questions started to make me doubt myself, and I became quite uncertain. And I guess if you look at the parents in this story, it's a good example of what I'm talking about. They get dragged before the Pharisees, and in verse 19, and are almost asked this ridiculous question, "Is this your son? Is this your son? Is this the one that you say was born blind?" Now, you would think as a parent, this is pretty easy answers to pretty easy questions to answer. But then they keep asking, "But if he is your son, then how can he see?" I really like the parents' answers in verse 21 and 20 and 21. They say, we know that he is our son. And we know that he was born blind." They were pretty confident about that too. But how he can see now and who opened his eyes, well, we're less certain of that one. We don't know. We don't know. Are you noticing how many times the word "know" is used in this Bible reading? The word is used in different contexts. People want to know things. Sometimes the word "know" is used in confident answers. We know that he is our son. But also the word "know" is used in uncertainty. Like, we don't know. We don't know. And sometimes this confident knowledge is used as an attacking weapon. Listen to the statement of the Pharisees in verse 24 when they're questioning the ex-blind man for a second time. And they say to him, "Give glory to God by telling us the truth," they said. "We know this man," they're talking about Jesus, "is a sinner. We know that he is a sinner." I'm not sure if they really do know. They want people to think that, and so therefore they're declaring it confidently as truth. Trust me, we know. And then that question leads to possibly the key verse of this passage, verse 25, when the ex-blind man says, whether Jesus is a sinner or not, he says, "I don't have enough information there. I can't make a declaration of that. I don't know," he said. And I'm not going to get into that. I just don't know. But he says, "There is one thing I do know, one thing that I am confident about, one thing that I'm assured. I was blind, but now I can see." This man may not have known who Jesus was or the politics of what was going on, the adherence to the Sabbath rules, all of that stuff he didn't know about. He was uncertain. But there's something nice about that reassurance, that genuine reassurance, the certainty that the man had that Jesus did make a difference. He knew that Jesus changed things. He knew that he was blind, and then after meeting Jesus, he could now see. If we jump over to the second reading from Philippians 3, we find the Apostle Paul is also expressing this same genuine confidence in Jesus. He has this unshakable assurance in his faith. Paul says that compared to knowing Jesus, all worldly accomplishments are like garbage, he says. He knows what is most important in life, the reality of knowing and being embraced by Jesus. For Paul, these are not just words. Paul is genuinely willing to give up everything to know Christ. So where did Paul find this assurance, this certainty from? As I mentioned before, in an era where we are so uncertain and things are so disrupted, that question becomes more pointed. especially when it comes to our faith. How can we be certain about our faith? How can we have the assurance of our salvation? How can we know that Jesus is indeed worth pursuing? Well, Paul does give us some hints in this passage from Philippians 3, and the first is the word no. Did you notice that the word no is also found a lot in this passage as well? Paul's certainty comes from knowing Jesus as Lord. But this knowing is not just a once-off thing, it's a journey, because Paul wants to know Jesus more. The knowing and know the power of the resurrection in his life. He considers it everything to know Jesus. And this knowing has got a real personal aspect to it. The Greek word that Paul uses for the word know is gnosko, which is like the process of learning, the process of coming to know something. It's also used as an idiom to refer to the process of a couple growing closer in a relationship, like they're getting to know each other. Paul says that he just doesn't want a theoretical knowledge of Jesus. He wants to know Jesus as Lord. And he does that by doing one thing. Now we're finally getting back to the one thing statements. He does that by doing one thing. And to do this, he gives a creative piece of writing that in the Greek is very clever, but in English is totally lost. He says, there is one thing I do, and then Paul basically just gives two words that sound very similar in Greek, almost identical, but have different meanings. Now, my Greek is not great, Greek pronunciation is not great, but I have practiced these. The two words are epilanithemani and epicteonomy. Oh, that's hard. They almost sound the same, but they have different meanings. So Paul says the one thing I do, and the first word means I sort of to forget or no longer care about or let go of what is behind me. And the other word means I reach out, I strain for, I try to grasp what is ahead. So Paul's saying the one thing he does in his goal to know Jesus more is that he does not focus on the stuff which is in the past. He tries to let go of the things that is holding him back. But instead he strains, he reaches forward for what is still to come. Sort of reminded me of the line from Isaiah 43, where God is, through the prophet Isaiah, is saying, do not cling to the events of the past or dwell on what has happened long ago. Watch for the new thing that I'm doing, God says. It is happening already. You can see it now. Part of what it means to know Jesus is looking forward and seeing what God is revealing, reaching forward and being part of the new thing that God is doing. Can you see how these two one things that we've looked at today are intertwined? The ex-blind man did not have many answers, but there was one thing he knew, that meeting Jesus made a difference. Whereas the Apostle Paul is saying that knowing Jesus was everything. And the one thing he was doing was to let go of the stuff that he was trying to hold on in the past and instead reach for the new thing that God is doing. I just want to finish with two gems that are found back in the first reading, the reading from John. These two hidden gems that for me just broke these open even more. We finished the reading in chapter 9 before the end of the story, and as I said, I encourage you to keep reading all of John chapter 9. But if you do keep reading, you will see that after the blind man is trying to answer the Pharisees' questions, he actually gets thrown out because he makes a statement against the Pharisees. And when Jesus hears that he's been thrown out of the synagogue, he goes and finds the blind man, and he asks the question of the blind man. Jesus asked the ex-blind man, "Do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe in the Son of Man? And I've got to say, after all the references to knowing through the entire John chapter 9, I was just a little disappointed that Jesus didn't say, do you know the Son of Man? It would have been a very nice link in. But maybe that's the point. You see, this man was only on the beginning of his faith journey with Jesus. And maybe it was unrealistic for him to be able to even declare that he knew Jesus, because he'd only just met Jesus. He knew that Jesus could make a difference. But it would be hard for him to declare that he knew Jesus at this point. And maybe that's where faith comes in. He didn't know Jesus yet, but he believed that Jesus could make a difference. He believed that Jesus was worth getting to know. That there was something divine in Jesus, that maybe Jesus had some of the answers that he was looking for. I think there's something in there for us today. Maybe we need to be challenged by this idea of getting to know Jesus more. And maybe that first step for us is to make the same declaration that this man made when he answered, Lord, I believe that you are somebody worth knowing more. The last gem that I just wanted to highlight has to do with the word know. It's come up all through our Bible readings today, know. And I've already mentioned that in the Philippians reading, Paul uses the Greek word gnosko for know, which is that process of learning, the process of coming to know something. But the writer, John, when he wrote the Gospel of John, did not choose that Greek word to talk about knowing. Instead, he uses the word edo or edo. Ado, I think you actually pronounce it. He decided to choose that word that in Greek also means to know, but it has another meaning as well. This word in Greek means, wait for it, because this is great, it means to see. To see. To perceive something with your eyes, to notice, to discover something because it's right there in front of you. It's that aspect of coming to know. So you're getting this? John, when writing about a blind man, keeps hinting, do you see? Do you see? Are you seeing this? Jesus in verse 39, if you keep reading, says that he has come into the world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Jesus is not talking about physical sight, but this ado, the knowledge that comes from discerning correctly the thing that is right in front of your eyes. We've spent 3 weeks looking at these 5 one-thing statements. We've been challenged about priorities, about the way we portion our time and our focus on the different things in our life. We've been challenged about thinking about what we are lacking in our life that we might need to add. And today we are being challenged to think about what does it mean to know Jesus as Lord. So to finish with, I just want to encourage all of us to open our eyes, to see what is right in front of us, to see this message that Jesus is revealing to us through this series. I do encourage us all to continue in our gnosko, this journey of learning and knowing Jesus more. But I also pray that, as the blind man said, there is so much that I've yet to see, yet to perceive, yet to know. But there is one thing I know, he said. There is one thing I do see now, that I was blind, and after encountering Jesus, now I see. May we too, in all the uncertainty that we are living, see and know and embrace the difference that Jesus can make in our life. Amen.